My name is Eleanor Byrne, and I'm a 63-year-old widow, retired art teacher, and at least once upon a time, a mother someone turned to for everything. These days, I mostly live in silence. Not the peaceful, meditative kind, but the heavy hush that settles when your phone doesn't ring and your name's no longer on anyone's lips. I live in a little house tucked away in the blue hills of Asheville, North Carolina. It's quiet here. Birds come in the morning, and the wind sounds like whispers through the trees. I keep my days soft, watering my garden, painting by the window, and keeping memories alive through brushstrokes and forgotten photographs. My daughter, Claire, has a daughter of her own, Isobel. I raised Isobel for years while Claire went to grad school and built a career in corporate marketing. Isobel's childhood was sun-drenched and smudged in pastel chalk. She used to call me Mimi in that high, bright voice that echoed joy. I made pancakes with chocolate chips shaped like hearts. She would sneak into my bed during thunderstorms and fall asleep with her fingers tangled in my hair. She was my sun, my reason. As Claire climbed the ladder, Isobel spent more and more time with me. I didn't mind. I gave updates and gallery exhibits and a part-time teaching offer to be there for her. Every school play, every scraped knee, every Mimi. Can I show you something? Moment. But time has a cruel way of wiping chalk drawings from the sidewalk. The Isobel of today is 18, elegant, opinionated, obsessed with TikTok dances and curated Instagram feeds. She talks about aesthetics and brands and how certain things don't align with her vibe. I try to understand her world, but often I feel like a dusty book on a shelf she hasn't opened in years. Still, I love her fiercely. 12 years ago, I opened a small savings account in her name. Every month, I tucked away part of my pension, birthday cash, even money I made selling seasonal wreaths on Etsy. It wasn't much at first, but little by little it grew. I called it the Ivy Fund, after the ivy plant Isobel brought me from her second grade science fair. Isobel's dream was to study fashion design in New York. A bold dream, expensive, competitive, but I believed in her even when she got distracted, even when she stopped sketching dresses and started buying them instead. I believed enough for both of us. When she turned 18, I didn't want to just write a check. I wanted to give her something real, something from the heart. So I painted her a gift, a portrait, but not of her now. It was a soft watercolor of her younger self, swinging barefoot on our old porch swing, hair caught in the breeze, that ivy plant sitting proudly on the step beside her. Her dress? A made-up design she once scribbled on a napkin and declared would be on the runway someday. It took me 6 weeks to finish. I worked in the evenings, sometimes past midnight. Every brushstroke was a prayer, every shadow a memory. I wrapped it in crisp white paper, tied with a velvet ribbon, and slipped a small card inside. To the girl who taught me how to hope. May you never forget who you are. Her birthday celebration was at a lakeside event hall that reeked of new money. Claire had outdone herself. White orchids draped every table, a catered sushi station, string quartet. It was glossy and cold, nothing like the warm chaos of the parties I used to throw with handmade streamers and cupcakes. When I arrived, no one even looked up. Claire offered me a side hug. "You made it," she said, eyes scanning the room for someone more interesting. I clutched my painting. "Where should I?" "Just place it over there," she waved toward a massive gift table stacked with designer boxes and metallic bows. But I didn't. Something told me to wait. Eventually, it was time for gifts. Isobel opened them one by one, each unboxing filmed by friends on their phones. Handbags, jewelry, a trip voucher. Then she reached for mine. "Oh, this one's for Mimi," she said, voice high and mocking. "How vintage." She tore the wrapping like it offended her. When the painting emerged, there was a pause, a silence so heavy it bruised. "Wait, is this me?" she asked, lifting it up. "Oh my God, that's the old porch swing." She laughed, a thin, performative laugh. "It's wow. So retro. Kinda tacky. But cute, I guess." There were chuckles. Someone took a photo. Claire gave me a tight, embarrassed smile but said nothing. The painting was propped against a wall, forgotten like last season's purse. My hands trembled. I smiled, but I was already unraveling. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I walked to my car, the painting still echoing in my mind. Cheap, tacky, retro. Not the gift. Me. At home, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't pour tea. I walked to the file cabinet, pulled out the thick folder marked Ivy Fund, and stared at it like it was a stranger. Every page was a sacrifice, every deposit a decision to put her first. I sat down at the computer, logged into the bank, and without a tear I clicked transfer. Not to Isobel, not to Claire, to me. The next morning, the sun poured into my little kitchen like it always did, soft and golden, trying to make things better just by being. But I wasn't fooled. The kettle hissed, the floor creaked under my slippers, and the silence stretched. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. No one called the day after that party. No thank you, no sorry. Just silence. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, honey and lemon like always, and stared at the envelope still sitting on the counter. The one I'd meant to give Isobel with the painting. Inside was a check. The entire balance of the Ivy Fund. Or at least it had been. Now it was empty. Reclaimed. Reinvested. In me. That morning I made a list. New easel. Quality oils. A trip to Savannah. I'd always dreamed of painting the marshes. A new roof for the shed. And at the very bottom, scribbled in faint pencil, a class just for me. Something I've never done before. For the first time in years, I was thinking in terms of me. That afternoon, while sorting through old canvases in the attic, I found an unfinished piece. A landscape of the Blue Ridge in spring. Half sky, half memory. I'd started it after my husband, Michael, passed, but I couldn't bring myself to finish. I wasn't ready then, but maybe I was now. I brought it downstairs, set it on the dining table, and stared at it until the light changed. Then the doorbell rang. I knew before I opened it. Isobel stood there, her hair in a neat bun, nails painted a pale lavender. In her hands, a box of macarons, lemon and pistachio, from that overpriced bakery downtown. "Hi, Mimi," she said brightly, as if nothing had happened. "I was just in the area and thought maybe we could talk." I stepped aside. She walked in like she still belonged there, like the air hadn't shifted. She placed the box on the counter and took a seat at the kitchen table without asking. I watched her carefully. "I'm really sorry about the party," she said. I was nervous and, well, everything was kind of overwhelming. You know how Mom gets with those big events. I nodded slowly. "Yes, I know how your mother gets." She smiled as if that was a joke. It wasn't. I shouldn't have said what I said about the painting. It's actually really nice. I mean, everyone says you're super talented. I raised an eyebrow. Everyone. She blushed faintly, looking down at her hands. Well, I showed it to a few friends afterward. One of them said it had this, like, ethereal nostalgia. They were actually impressed. "How generous," I murmured. Silence. She shifted in her chair, the smile fading. "Mimi, I miss you. I know I've been distant, but I want to get back to how things used to be. I've been thinking about college again. Parsons is still my dream, and I wanted you to know that. In case." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. My heart squeezed. She was back for the fund. Of course she was, but I smiled. Soft, serene, as if her words didn't cut. "That's good to hear," I said calmly. "Dreams should be pursued, but they're best built on honesty, don't you think?" She looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" I leaned forward, voice even. "I mean, I've spent 18 years pouring into you. Time, money, love. And at your party, in front of strangers, you laughed at the only thing I had left to give." She opened her mouth. I held up a hand. "I'm not angry, Isobel. I'm awake. For the first time in years. And while I'm glad you're thinking about your future, I've started thinking about mine." Silence again. This time heavier. "I always thought love meant giving until you were empty," I continued. "But now I know if it empties you, it's not love. It's performance." Her eyes welled up. "I didn't mean to." "You did," I said gently. "But I forgive you." She blinked. "You do?" "Yes, but I don't owe you anything. Not anymore." She sat back, stunned. The silence between us wasn't cruel. It was clarity. After a while, she stood. I guess I'll go. I walked her to the door. She turned one last time. Mimi, do you think someday you'll help me again? I looked her straight in the eyes. If you want something from me again, Isobel, earn it. And then I closed the door. Not with anger, with peace. I didn't expect to hear from Isobel again, at least not soon. The silence was too thick now, too final. But a week later, the phone buzzed in my hand. A text. Mimi, can we talk? I've been thinking a lot about everything. I'm sorry. Can we please meet? My first instinct was to delete it, to ignore it. But then I paused. Maybe it wasn't for her. Maybe it was for me. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the screen. For the first time in ages, I wasn't just playing a part in someone else's story. I wasn't running to the rescue, carrying the weight of others' needs and ignoring my own. I was the author now. I tapped out a quick response. I'll meet you tomorrow, 3 p.m., at the park. Bring the truth. The park was where I took long walks when I needed to clear my head. It was quiet, peaceful, with tall pines lining the path and the creek that babbled at the far end. I used to take Isobel there when she was small, running ahead, always laughing. Her laughter like the sound of the wind in the trees. I wondered if she still remembered those days. The next day I arrived early, sat on the bench by the creek, watching the water swirl around rocks that had been there longer than I had. Time was a strange thing. It passed, but something stayed, steady, unchanging. Isobel arrived a few minutes later, looking less polished than usual. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she wore an oversized sweater and jeans, as though she'd been out running errands, not preparing for a conversation that could change everything. She sat beside me on the bench without a word, her eyes focused on the creek, but I could tell she was thinking, searching for the right words. Thank you for meeting me, she said quietly, her voice almost fragile. I know I've messed up. I've been so focused on what everyone else wanted from me that I forgot about what I wanted. And I know that's no excuse for how I treated you. I nodded, my gaze still fixed on the water. I wasn't going to rush her. I wanted her to say it all, to truly mean it. I wasn't just using you, Mimi, she continued, voice trembling. I was just lost. Everything has been so overwhelming lately. But that's no excuse for how I acted. I hurt you and I'm sorry. She paused, and for a moment I thought she might start crying. But she didn't. She just sat there, her hands folded in her lap, shoulders hunched with the weight of whatever shame she carried. I turned to her slowly, the silence lingering like a question neither of us had the courage to ask. You weren't just using me, Isobel. You were hiding from yourself, and you thought you could hide in the dream I built for you. Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. So I continued. I've spent years convincing myself that I could give you everything, give you the future you deserved. I saved for you. I painted for you. I gave up so much of myself, thinking you'd appreciate it. But I was wrong. Her lips parted to speak, but I raised a hand. It's not about the money. It never was. It's about the truth, Isobel. And the truth is, I've been invisible for so long, I forgot I was even here. Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time, I saw her as she truly was vulnerable, lost. I had to admit, it hurt me to see her like that. But it wasn't the pain of betrayal anymore. It was the pain of knowing she was lost, but she hadn't yet found her way back. I don't know who I am anymore, she whispered, more to herself than to me. I don't know what I want. I thought I did, but I just keep screwing it all up. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs. The quiet between us wasn't heavy now. It was just real. That's the thing, Isobel. You can't find yourself in someone else's dream. You've got to build your own, and you've got to trust yourself to do it. She looked at me, eyes filled with uncertainty. But there was something else there too. A flicker, a spark. I'm not giving you the Ivy fund back, I said softly. That's not what this is about. Her face fell, and she looked down at her hands. But I could see the wheels turning in her head, the understanding creeping in. I'm not doing this out of spite, I added, but because it's time for you to learn how to stand on your own. I can't be the one carrying your dreams for you anymore. You've got to do that yourself. Isobel nodded slowly, her eyes red but not empty. I know, she said, the words coming with a weight that hadn't been there before. I've been selfish, and I don't know what I was expecting from you. I wanted to feel like I wasn't alone. You're not alone, I replied, but you're not a child anymore. You have to fight for what you want, just like I had to fight for mine. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't painful. It was a pause, a moment to let the words settle. Finally, she stood, offering a small smile. I stood as well, my back straight, my heart lighter than it had been in years. We all have our own battles to fight, Isobel. You'll find your way. Just don't stop looking for it. She hugged me then. A real hug. Not the performative one she used to give me. This one was different. I squeezed her back, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't invisible. I was seen. When she pulled away, she gave me one last look, gentle, knowing, and then turned, walking down the path toward the parking lot. I watched her go, feeling the wind brush through my hair, and I knew something I hadn't known in years. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for her. Not for anyone. It had been weeks since that conversation with Isobel, and while I felt a strange peace in my heart, I also knew the storm wasn't over. The silence between us wasn't a resolution, it was just a pause. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for her to come around. I wasn't waiting for validation from anyone. I spent the days painting, waking up before sunrise to capture the fleeting colors of the morning light. I painted landscapes, portraits, whatever I felt called to, free from the obligation of anyone's approval. My brushes were no longer just tools. They were the way I was reclaiming my soul, my space. The phone, however, kept ringing. Claire called once, then again. Then Isobel left a message, a voice filled with regret, but it wasn't the apology I needed. It was a plea, a promise of I'll do better this time that rang hollow. I didn't return any of them, and for the first time in years, that silence didn't gnaw at me. It felt like air after being underwater for too long. I threw myself into my art more than I ever had before. A gallery show here, a local exhibition there. I even signed up for a workshop in New Orleans, something I dreamed of doing for decades. Every step I took for me. There was no longer a sacrifice. I was no longer a background player in someone else's story. I was living my own narrative, and it felt incredible. One rainy Thursday afternoon, just as I was about to head out to buy some new paints, my phone buzzed. This time, it was an email from a curator in Asheville. Her name was Elena. The subject line read, "Your work has been recommended. Are you interested in a solo exhibition?" I blinked, rereading the message. It had come out of nowhere, like a gift from the universe, and as I clicked through to see more, my heart skipped a beat. The curator had seen my painting at a local art fair, a piece I'd painted months ago and barely thought twice about, one of the many canvases I'd created without worrying about approval. It was a portrait of a woman standing tall in a field of golden wildflowers, her arms wide open as if embracing everything the world had to offer. Elena was offering me a show. In Asheville, I could hardly breathe. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced as I thought about the possibility of it. What would it be like to walk into a gallery where my work was hanging? To be seen, truly seen, for the first time in years? To hear people talking about my art, my story, not about what I had given away, but about what I had built for myself. By morning, the decision was made. I was going to take the offer. I was going to stand on my own 2 feet and show the world who I was. No more waiting. No more being silent. I emailed Elena back with a quick reply. Yes, I would love to. Let's make this happen. The next few weeks were a blur. There were phone calls with the gallery, meetings with the team, and endless hours spent choosing pieces for the show. But more than that, there was a deep, growing sense of fulfillment that bubbled up from within me. Every brushstroke felt like reclaiming a part of myself I thought I had lost. And then one quiet evening, as I was finishing a new piece, a landscape of my old home, a reflection of the past and the present, I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, I froze. Isobel stood there, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. She looked different. Not the confident, entitled girl who had waltzed into my life like she owned it. This version of her was softer, quieter, almost unsure. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. For a moment I hesitated. My heart twinged with something. Maybe regret, maybe hope, but I nodded. She stepped inside, and I closed the door behind her. We sat at the kitchen table again, the same place we always sat when we were working on projects together, or sharing coffee, or reminiscing. This time, though, it felt different. There was no pretense, no performance. Just two women, facing each other in the quiet aftermath of everything that had happened. "I've been thinking," she said after a long pause, about what she said. About standing on my own. I never really understood what that meant until now. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "I've been trying. I started looking into schools, and I even applied for a few jobs. But most of all, I'm trying to understand who I am without using other people to fill that void." I nodded slowly. "That's a good start." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I want to say I'm sorry. For everything. For using you. For taking you for granted. And for never seeing how much you gave. I was selfish. And I didn't even know it." Her words, raw and honest, made something in my chest loosen. Maybe it was the final piece I needed to let go. "Isobel," I said gently, "I'm glad you're realizing that. But I don't need an apology. Not from you. What I needed was for you to see the truth. To see yourself." She swallowed, nodding. "I'm trying. I really am. And I'm so proud of you, Mimi, for doing this on your own. I know it wasn't easy. I can't believe I was blind to how much you've always given." I squeezed her hand. "It's never about what I've given, Isobel. It's about what you're willing to give yourself." She smiled softly. "I think I finally understand that." And with those words, everything shifted. The hurt, the distance, the years of silent longing. It all began to fade into the past. We talked for hours that day. Not about money, not about dreams, just about life, about who we were becoming. And when she finally stood to leave, she didn't walk away in the same hurried, self-centered way she had the last time. She left with grace, with respect. I watched her go, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt alive. That evening, I stood in my studio, staring at the canvas in front of me, the one I had been working on all week. The colors were bright now, bold and unapologetic. And for the first time, I painted not just for me, but for the woman I had become. Not a mother, not a grandmother, not a sacrifice, just me. The world had told me I was too old, too quiet, too invisible to make a difference. But here I was, proving. The gallery show in Asheville was a blur of lights, faces, and conversations. I was nervous, of course, who wouldn't be? But it was a different kind of nervousness. Not the kind I used to feel before family gatherings or awkward meetings. This was the kind of nervousness that came with possibility. The excitement of standing in a room full of strangers, watching them look at my work, and knowing, truly knowing, that they were seeing me. The night before the opening, I sat in front of the mirror in my modest bedroom, pulling on a simple black dress I hadn't worn in years. It fit me differently now. The fabric stretched more comfortably, the cut more flattering. It wasn't just a dress, it was a marker of how far I'd come. I wasn't hiding behind the seams of someone else's dream anymore. I was wearing my own skin. My hand shook as I adjusted my earrings, a small gift I had given myself after my first sale of a painting. It was just a small victory, but it was mine. When I walked into the gallery the next evening, the lights were soft, the air warm, and the walls stood high, holding my work. My work. It took my breath away. The paintings that had once been scribbles on cheap canvases, painted in desperation, now stood as declarations of who I was. Not just a mother, not just a grandmother, but an artist, a creator, a woman who had finally given herself the chance to be seen. The crowd mingled, talking softly, eyes occasionally glancing at my paintings, but it wasn't until one of the first attendees stopped in front of my portrait of a woman standing in the wildflowers, arms stretched wide, that the shift happened. Oh, wow, the woman said, her voice filled with awe. This is incredible. It's like the woman in the painting is ready to take on the world. You can feel her strength. I stood beside her, heart hammering in my chest, but my voice steady. That's the point. She's not waiting anymore. She's taking her own future. The woman nodded, her lips curving into a smile. I love that. It's so powerful. Can you imagine living without fear like that? I smiled back. I can, and I'm living it. As the evening wore on, people came and went. Some lingered by the paintings longer than others, studying each detail, each stroke of the brush. But what caught me most was the way they looked at me. They didn't just see an older woman. They didn't see someone who was too late to make her mark. They saw a story unfolding before them. They saw me. By the end of the night, I had sold 3 pieces. But more than that, I had sold my voice. I had told my story through every brushstroke, every inch of canvas, and I felt something inside me shift. I was not invisible. Elena, the curator who had found my work, came over to me with a soft smile. You've got something special, Eleanor. People are really connecting with your story. I think this show is just the beginning. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it back, smiling instead. Thank you. I think it is too. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The sales continued. Media outlets started calling. An article about my work was published in a local magazine, and my Instagram, which had been mostly filled with snapshots of my daily life, was now an art portfolio. I started getting messages from people who said they saw themselves in my paintings. Mothers, daughters, women who had been overlooked or worse, silenced. My art had become a bridge between us, and I realized in that moment that I had not just painted my past. I had painted a future for me, and for every woman who had ever felt invisible. And then one Tuesday afternoon, when I was at my studio, I received another call. This one was from a gallery in Brooklyn, a small, intimate space that had heard about my work from the exhibition. They wanted to feature me in their upcoming women's empowerment exhibit. The email followed shortly after. We've been following your success and are impressed with how your paintings speak to the strength and resilience of women. We'd be honored to showcase your work in our gallery. Would you be interested? I could hardly believe it. My art wasn't just local anymore. It was reaching out, connecting with people across the country, across the world. I was finally being seen for who I was. Not the mother who had sacrificed, not the grandmother who was overlooked, but the woman who had found her voice and dared to be heard. I didn't waste a moment. I replied, yes, I would be honored. Let's make it happen. With each new opportunity, each new connection, my confidence grew. I began planning my trip to New York, to Brooklyn. But just before I left, something unexpected happened. Isobel called. Hi, Mimi. Her voice was tentative. I know we barely talked since everything. But I wanted to tell you something. I sat down, feeling the air change around me. What is it, Isobel? She hesitated. I've been thinking about what you said about standing on my own. And I know I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to change. I've started my own art project. I know it's not perfect, but I wanted to ask if you'd look at it. Not because of the Ivy Fund. Not because I need something from you. But because you're my Mimi and I've missed you. I didn't answer right away. The memories of her standing in my kitchen, asking for what she could get, were still fresh. But this time there was no urgency. No strings attached. I'd love to see it, I said finally. Come by when you can. That afternoon, she showed up with a small sketch pad, her eyes wide, filled with hope and fear. I smiled, genuinely, as she sat across from me and flipped open the pad. Her drawings were rough, unfinished, imperfect, but there was something real about them. Something raw. Isobel, I said, these are beautiful. You've got something. She beamed. You really think so? I do, I replied. But more than that, you've got the courage to show it. That's the hardest part. She nodded, taking a deep breath. I've got a lot to learn, but I'm willing to try. And in that moment, I realized something important. I had been holding on to the idea of what Isobel could be. But now I was letting go of all the expectations. She was finding her own way. and I was no longer waiting for her to find it through me. I was proud of her for trying. I was proud of me for not needing anything from her anymore. The next day, I left for New York. I stood in the Brooklyn Gallery, looking around at the walls filled with art that spoke of pain, growth, joy, and strength. My paintings hung there, surrounded by pieces from other women who had also found their voices. And I realized something profound in that moment. This was my place. Not because I had been overlooked, not because I had been invisible, but because I had chosen to stand in my own light. And for the first time, I was no longer waiting for someone else to define me. The gallery opening in Brooklyn was a whirlwind of emotions, the kind that can only come from finally stepping into your own. It was everything I had dreamed of, and yet, nothing like I had imagined. There was a quiet pride that filled me, not the kind that came from attention or accolades, but the kind that radiated from knowing I had made it here by my own hand. The applause wasn't for what I had given up, but for what I had built. Standing there in the gallery, surrounded by strangers who saw my art and understood my story, I finally realized that my worth wasn't tied to what I had sacrificed or how much I had given to others. It was in my ability to stand on my own, to claim my space in the world without hesitation. The night was a blur of introductions, compliments, and conversations, but amidst all the excitement, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. There, across the room, was Isobel. She had come. I had been expecting her. After the conversation we'd had a few weeks ago, I knew it was only a matter of time before she would reach out again. But I hadn't expected to see her standing there, amidst the crowd of strangers, her eyes scanning the paintings, taking in each brushstroke with the same reverence that had once belonged to her. When she saw me, she froze. Her face softened, the tension in her shoulders dissipating as she walked toward me. She was no longer the confident, distant version of herself I had seen at her birthday party. This was a different Isobel. She was humble. She was raw. I didn't say anything at first. I just waited for her to speak. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice shaking. I didn't know what it would feel like to see your work like this, to see it in a place where people actually understand it. I nodded, my heart swelling with an emotion I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. I didn't know either, I said quietly. I didn't know it would feel like this to finally be seen. She stepped closer, her gaze moving from one painting to the next. She paused in front of the piece I had titled The Wildflower Woman, the one of a woman standing with arms wide, ready to face the world. I remember when you started painting again, she said softly, her fingers brushing the edge of the canvas. I used to think it was just a hobby, something you did to pass the time. But now, I see it differently. I see how much you put into it. I swallowed the lump in my throat, but my voice remained steady. It wasn't just a hobby, Isobel. It was my way of remembering who I am, and who I used to be. She looked at me then, really looked at me, with eyes that were no longer clouded by judgment or expectation. I'm sorry, she said again, her voice filled with sincerity. I was so wrapped up in my own life that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. I thought I needed your money, your support, but what I needed the most was just you. The words hung in the air between us, raw and honest. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just a shadow in her life, like I had been for so long. I was more than a giver. I was more than the invisible force in the background. I was me. I smiled at her, that soft smile that felt like the first one I'd given in years. I know, sweetheart, but I also know that you're learning to stand on your own now. And that's what I've always wanted for you. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I'm going to keep trying. I promise. We stood there for a moment, just the two of us, surrounded by people who saw my art, but didn't know the depth of what it represented. They didn't know the years of sacrifice, the quiet love, the pain of being invisible. Only Isobel and I understood that. And then, with a gentle squeeze of her hand, I said, I'm proud of you, Isobel. I always have been. Just never forget to be proud of yourself, too. She smiled, a real smile this time, full of understanding. I won't. As the evening wore on and the crowd continued to admire my work, I couldn't help but feel that I was finally where I belonged. Not just in the gallery, not just in New York, but in my own life. The woman I had been waiting to become was already here. I had to stop waiting for someone else to give me permission to live fully. I had to take it for myself. The next day, Elena called to tell me that the wildflower woman had sold to a collector from Paris. I almost didn't believe it at first, but the excitement in her voice was enough to confirm that it was real. The painting was going to be displayed in a private collection to be shared with a broader audience. For a moment, I just sat in silence, letting the weight of it sink in. This wasn't just a sale. This was validation, not from anyone else, but from me. I had created something that resonated. Something that spoke not just to the viewer, but to the part of myself I had buried for so long. That afternoon, I sat at my desk, looking at my calendar for the next few months. There were offers to exhibit in other cities, invitations to speak about my work, and articles coming out in major art magazines. It was overwhelming, but it was mine. All of it. I had built this. I had earned it. I thought about Isobel and what she had said about trying. It made me realize something important. We were both still learning, still growing. And that was okay. I had learned how to stand on my own, and so had she. I picked up the phone and called her, my heart lighter than it had been in years. "Isobel," I said when she answered, "I think we're both ready to take on the world." She laughed, a full, genuine laugh. "I think we are, Mimi." And in that moment, I knew that I had found what I had been looking for all along. Not just in my art, but in myself. The power to create. The power to let go. The power to rise. A few months had passed since the exhibition in Brooklyn, and life felt different. Not just the events that had unfolded, the gallery shows, the articles, the phone calls, but the way I saw the world. The way I walked through it. Each step was a little more grounded. Each breath a little more deliberate. I had shed the weight of being invisible. The quiet pain that had once haunted me was no longer a constant companion. Instead, I felt light, like I had finally learned how to breathe again. I was busy. There were always meetings, new paintings, commissions to fulfill. My studio had transformed from a small corner of my home into a proper creative space. The walls lined with canvases and the air thick with the smell of oils and turpentine. The windows, once covered in dust and cobwebs, now let in the kind of light that I could only have dreamed of when I first picked up a brush all those years ago. One Saturday afternoon, as I was sitting at my desk, painting a new piece for an upcoming show in San Francisco, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something in my gut told me to answer it. "Hello," I said, wiping the paint from my fingers. "Eleanor." The voice on the other end was calm, but there was a nervous edge to it. "This is Emily Collins. I'm with the Art Society of New York. I hope I'm not disturbing you." I sat up straighter, setting the brush down. "The Art Society? No, not at all. How can I help you?" "I've been following your work for some time now, and I wanted to personally reach out to you." I felt my heart skip. Emily Collins. The name didn't ring a bell at first, but then it clicked. She was a curator, a name whispered in art circles as someone who could elevate an artist's career to new heights. She had the connections, the reach. "We'd like to feature one of your pieces in our upcoming exhibition, Legacy of Women Artists. It's a special showcase focused on celebrating the stories and art of women who have defined their own paths." My breath caught. She laughed softly. "I understand. We would love to have one of your paintings, Eleanor. Your work speaks to so many people, and I believe it's time for the world to see it on a larger scale." I could hardly believe it. My work. In an exhibition that would draw collectors, critics, and artists from around the world. I wasn't ready to cry, but my hands trembled. "Which painting are you interested in?" "The Wildflower Woman," she said. "It's been recommended by several of our patrons. It would be an honor to display it." I felt my chest tighten with emotion. The Wildflower Woman. The piece I had painted for myself. A piece I had once doubted. A piece that had come to symbolize my strength. Now it would be shown to the world. "I would be honored," I said quietly. "Please send me the details." We discussed logistics, finalizing the terms, and the conversation ended with Emily's assurance that they would handle everything. When I hung up the phone, I sat there, staring at the wall. The room seemed to shrink around me, the air thick with the weight of what had just happened. I had been invited to showcase my work in New York City. I had come full circle, from the woman who had been humiliated at her granddaughter's party to the artist, whose paintings would now be hanging in one of the world's most prestigious art societies. And suddenly everything I had worked for, every brushstroke, every late night, every sacrifice, felt worth it. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was an artist, a woman with a story, and my art was finally being seen. A few weeks later, I stood in front of the wildflower woman, framed and poised to travel to New York. It felt surreal. The woman in the painting, arms wide, her back straight, ready to embrace whatever the world had to offer, seemed to look at me with a knowing smile. This was more than just a piece of art. It was a reflection of me, the woman I had become. The day before the painting was to be shipped off to New York, I received a call from Isobel. She had been quiet for a while, and I hadn't heard much from her since our last conversation. I was in the studio, my hands covered in paint, but I answered anyway. Mimi. Her voice was tentative, like she was unsure how to start. Can I come over? I glanced around at the room, at the mess of paint and brushes scattered around me. Of course, sweetheart. I'll see you soon. She arrived later that evening, her eyes filled with a mix of uncertainty and hope. She had grown up so quickly. I hardly recognized the young woman standing in front of me. The confident, selfish Isobel I had known before was gone. In her place stood someone else, someone who had learned to question, to grow. Can we talk? She asked, sitting down at the table. I nodded, setting aside the painting I had been working on. Of course, for a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just filled with unspoken understanding. Finally, she spoke. I know I've hurt you, and I know I can't fix what I did, but I'm trying. I've been working on myself. I'm working on my art now. And I want you to know that I'm proud of you. You've taught me something I didn't see before. I've been so focused on getting ahead that I didn't see what I had. But now I see it, Mimi. My heart ached, but in a different way. This wasn't the apology I had been waiting for. And yet, it felt like the one I had needed all along. It wasn't about the Ivy Fund or the sacrifices I had made. It was about her finally seeing me, seeing us, and understanding the depth of what it meant to love, truly love, without strings attached. I'm proud of you too, Isobel, I said, my voice steady. You've come a long way. She smiled, a small, genuine smile that spoke volumes. I want to show you my sketchbook one day, she said, her eyes bright with a new kind of hope. I'd love that, I said, reaching out to squeeze her hand. The next day, I packed the painting for its journey to New York. Isobel helped me wrap it carefully, securing it in the padded box that would carry it across the country. When we were done, she stepped back, her eyes shining with admiration. I'm so proud of you, Mimi, she said quietly. I smiled at her, my heart full. And I'm proud of you. As I watched her leave, I knew something profound had shifted. It wasn't just about the art. It was about the future. The legacy of love, of strength, of standing tall even when the world tried to knock you down. And now I was passing that on. The day I walked into the Art Society of New York, my heart beat faster than it had in years. The gallery was pristine, the walls white and welcoming, and the air was filled with the gentle hum of anticipation. This wasn't just a building, it was a sanctuary for art, for stories, for the kind of work that had the power to transform the world. And here I was, standing in the middle of it all. I had arrived early, just as the final touches were being made to the exhibit. The spotlight shone on each piece, drawing out their stories, their emotions. The wildflower woman was placed center stage, as if she, too, were claiming her space in the world. I walked toward it, my heart swelling as I gazed at my work, framed and lit with such care. For a moment, I forgot about the years of sacrifice, the quiet pain, the loneliness. I remembered only the woman who had painted this piece, a woman who was ready to face the world with open arms, a woman who was no longer afraid of being seen. A voice interrupted my reverie. Eleanor. I turned to see Elena, the curator, walking toward me with a smile. We're ready to begin whenever you are. I nodded, taking a deep breath. This was it. I wasn't just a woman whose art was on display anymore. I was a storyteller, an artist, a woman who had found her voice. As the room began to fill with guests, I stood by the painting, talking to people who shared their admiration for the piece. The conversations flowed, but what struck me the most was the connection people felt with the work. They weren't just admiring the technique, they were seeing themselves in it. I could feel it in the way they spoke, in the way they lingered, in the way they asked questions. The art wasn't just about me anymore. It was about them, too. A couple of hours later, the opening speech was made, and the evening began in full swing. People milled around, wine glasses in hand, talking, laughing, admiring the work. But there was a moment, just a brief one, when the room quieted. The wildflower woman was the focus now, no longer just my painting, but a symbol of strength, of hope, of a woman standing tall after years of being overlooked. And that's when I saw her. Isobel walked into the room, looking different from the last time I had seen her. She wasn't the same confident young woman who had once distanced herself from me. She was quieter now, more grounded, as if the lessons she had learned were finally beginning to sink in. She moved slowly, almost reverently, toward my painting, her eyes scanning it as if it were something sacred. She didn't see me at first. She was lost in the piece, studying the details, the colors, the life in the canvas. And for a moment, I just watched her, my heart swelling with something I couldn't quite name. Then she turned to me, her eyes glistening. "Mimi," she said softly, it's amazing. I didn't understand it before, but now I do. I see it. I see you." I smiled, my throat tight. "I'm glad you do, sweetheart." Isobel stepped closer, her voice low but full of emotion. "I'm sorry for everything, Mimi. I know I can't undo the past, but I'm trying. I've started my own art now. I've been drawing, painting, just trying to find my way. I'm not asking for anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I see you. I see what you've done, and I'm proud of you." I didn't have the words at first. It wasn't the apology I had waited for, but it was the apology I had needed. It wasn't about the money, the IV fund, or the years I had spent sacrificing myself for her and for Claire. It was about seeing each other, really seeing each other, for who we were and who we were becoming. "I'm proud of you too," I said quietly. "You've come a long way, Isobel." She smiled, a small but genuine smile that made my heart lighter. "I want you to know that you've always been my inspiration, Mimi, even when I didn't say it. You're the reason I'm doing this." She reached out and hugged me, and I held her close, feeling the shift in our relationship. This wasn't the same Isobel I had once tried to fix. This was a new Isobel, one who was learning to stand on her own, just as I had. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and compliments, but something had shifted in me, too. I was no longer clinging to the idea of what I had hoped Isobel would become. I had accepted her for who she was, someone who was on her own journey, just as I was on mine. By the end of the night, the Wildflower Woman had been sold, as well as a few other pieces. The conversations continued, the connections deepened, but I didn't feel the need to rush. I was finally here, standing in the spotlight, not as someone's mother or grandmother, but as Eleanor Byrne, an artist with a story to tell. As I packed up my things and prepared to leave, Isobel came to find me. She was carrying a small sketchbook, and when she handed it to me, I saw that it was filled with drawings of her own work, of things she had started creating after our conversation. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. "Would you look at these?" she asked quietly. "Maybe you could help me. Teach me something." I took the sketchbook from her and flipped through the pages. "I'll look at them, Isobel. But you don't need me to teach you. You just need to keep going." She smiled softly. "I will. I promise." The next morning, I stood in front of my easel, a new canvas waiting for me. The world felt different now, brighter, fuller. And as I dipped my brush into the paint, I realized something profound. This was my life now. This was my legacy. I wasn't just painting for me anymore. I was painting for all the women who had been silenced, for those who had given everything and were left in the background, for those who had been made to feel invisible. But no more. This was the beginning of something new. A few months after the show in New York, my life had taken a turn I couldn't have predicted. Each day felt more like a dream, but not the kind of dream where you wake up and wish you hadn't. No, this was a waking dream, a life I had carefully crafted, piece by piece, brushstroke by brushstroke. I was no longer just the woman who lived in the background. I was an artist. I was Eleanor Byrne. My paintings were now being shown in galleries across the country, San Francisco, Chicago, even Paris. Invitations to speak at women's empowerment conferences flooded my inbox, and soon I found myself traveling to places I had once only read about in art history books. The first time I saw my work hanging in a gallery in San Francisco, I stood there in awe, realizing that it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the women who connected with it, who saw their own stories in my art. They had found their own strength through the stories I had painted. But amid the whirlwind of success and newfound fame, I couldn't help but think about the people who had been there from the beginning. People like Isobel. I had forgiven her. I had made peace with the way things had unfolded between us. But that didn't mean the work was over. Healing takes time. And the last part of healing for me was realizing that I didn't just need to be an artist. I needed to be a woman who stood proudly in the truth of who I had become. And Isobel, she was still on her path. We had grown closer over the past few months, with me offering her advice when she needed it, but never pushing. She had finally started to take ownership of her own dreams, just like I had. One evening, as I sat in my studio, looking over my latest piece, a bold, vibrant portrait of a woman standing in the middle of a storm with an expression of defiance, I received a message from Isobel. Mimi, I've been thinking. You've always said that art isn't about perfection. I think I'm ready to show you something. Can you meet me tomorrow? I smiled to myself, realizing how far she had come. Her message was proof that she was no longer waiting for me to fix things. She was finding her own voice, her own identity. It was a painful, beautiful journey, but one that was finally beginning to pay off. The next day, I met her at a quiet cafe, the kind of place we used to visit when she was little, before everything had gotten complicated. She was holding a small canvas wrapped in brown paper. When she placed it in front of me, my breath caught in my chest. It was a self-portrait. The Isobel I had known, the one who hid behind filters and facades, was gone. In her place was a woman who was raw, vulnerable, and powerful. She had painted herself standing strong in a field of wildflowers, her face tilted upward toward the sun, as if she had just realized her own worth. Her gaze was steady, her hand strong, and she wasn't looking back. You did this, I asked, my voice thick with emotion. She nodded, biting her lip. I don't know if it's good, but it's mine. I'm trying, Mimi. I really am. Tears pricked at my eyes. I reached across the table and took her hand. It's beautiful, Isobel. You've come so far. I'm so proud of you. She smiled, her eyes shining. I'm proud of you, too. You've taught me more than you'll ever know. It wasn't the end of our journey. There would be more struggles, more lessons, more moments of doubt. But I knew, deep in my bones, that we had both reached a place of peace. She had learned to stand on her own, and I had learned to embrace the woman I had become. No longer invisible, no longer silent. The following year, Isobel had her first solo art show. Her work was raw, honest, and unapologetic. It was clear that she had found her own voice, her own path. And I stood by her, proud beyond measure. As I looked at her paintings, at the women she had created, at the stories she had told, I realized that the legacy I had always dreamed of wasn't just in my own art. It was in hers, too. A few months after her show, Isobel called me one night, the excitement in her voice unmistakable. Mimi, I got in. To CalArts. They accepted me. I gasped. Isobel, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. She laughed, a little breathless. I don't know if I would have gotten here without everything you taught me. You made me believe that I could do it. No, I said, my voice steady but full of warmth. You did this yourself. I only showed you how to believe in yourself. In that moment, I realized that the greatest gift I had ever given her wasn't money or a college fund. It was the belief that she could stand on her own, that she could create her own future. And that was something worth more than anything I could have ever bought. As I sat in my studio that night, staring at my latest work, I thought about the journey I had taken, how far I had come, The pain of feeling invisible, of sacrificing my own dreams for others, had shaped me into the woman I was now. A woman who stood tall, not just for herself, but for others too. And now my legacy wasn't just about the art I had created, but the people I had inspired to do the same. I took a deep breath and smiled to myself. This was the beginning of something new, something beautiful. I wasn't just an artist anymore. I was a woman who had found her voice, who had learned to let go of the past and embrace the future. A woman who had given everything, but in the end had found herself.